Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing on a barren, blistered plain. The air tastes of sulfur and ash. The sky hangs heavy with grey clouds that haven't broken for years. The ground beneath your feet is cracked and lifeless, littered with the fossilized remains of creatures that couldn't survive what came before. This is Earth approximately 252 million years ago, and it has just endured the worst catastrophe in the history of life itself. The Permian-Triassic extinction event, sometimes called the Great Dying, had just scoured the planet clean. Roughly 81% of all marine species vanished. 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species disappeared. The oceans turned acidic and stagnant. Volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia had pumped enough carbon dioxide and sulfur into the atmosphere to choke the world. It was, by every measure, the closest life on Earth has ever come to total annihilation. And yet, from this apocalyptic wasteland, something new was about to emerge. Something that would come to dominate the planet for the next 186 million years. Something we now call dinosaurs. If you enjoy learning about prehistoric entities while you relax, you might want to like this video and subscribe. It really helps out, so thank you. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The story of dinosaurs doesn't begin with their arrival. It begins with the slow, painful recovery of a world trying to remember how to live. The Triassic Period stretched from 252 million years ago to 201 million years ago, spanning roughly 50 million years. In geological terms, this was the first period of the Mesozoic era, the middle age of Earth's history, sandwiched between the ancient Paleozoic and the more recent Cenozoic, the age we still inhabit today. When the Triassic began, Earth looked nothing like the fragmented continents we know now. Instead, all the major land masses had fused together into one colossal supercontinent called Pangaea. Picture a giant C-shaped landmass straddling the equator, stretching from pole to pole, surrounded by a single massive ocean called Panthalassa. Within the embrace of that sea lay another ocean, the Tethys Sea, its warm waters lapping against Pangaea's eastern shores. This geographic configuration had profound consequences for climate and life. With so much land locked together, the interior regions of Pangaea were far from any moderating ocean influence. The result was extreme continentality, meaning scorching hot summers and bitterly cold winters in the heartland. Coastal regions fared better, benefiting from monsoonal rains that swept in from the ocean. But the vast deserts of Pangaea's interior were among the most inhospitable places Earth has ever produced. Yet even in this harsh environment, life persisted. It had to. Evolution doesn't wait for ideal conditions. The early Triassic world was dominated not by dinosaurs, but by their predecessors and competitors. Mammal-like reptiles called synapsids, particularly creatures like Lystrosaurus, were among the first to repopulate the devastated landscapes. Lystrosaurus was a stocky, pig-sized herbivore with a beak-like snout and tusks. It wasn't glamorous, but it was tough, and toughness mattered more than anything in those early days. Fossils of Lystrosaurus have been found on multiple continents, testament to its success in the aftermath of extinction. But synapsids wouldn't remain dominant for long. A new lineage was rising, one that would eventually eclipse them: the archosaurs, the so-called ruling reptiles. Archosaurs were a diverse group of reptiles that included the ancestors of modern crocodiles, pterosaurs, and, most importantly for our story, dinosaurs. What made archosaurs special was a suite of evolutionary innovations that gave them an edge in the changing Triassic environment. They had more efficient respiratory systems with a pattern of air flow through their lungs that allowed for better oxygen extraction. This was crucial in a world where atmospheric oxygen levels may have been lower than today. They had upright limbs positioned directly beneath their bodies, rather than sprawling out to the sides like those of earlier reptiles. This posture was more energy efficient for walking and running, and it allowed for greater agility and speed. And perhaps most importantly, archosaurs seemed better adapted to the increasingly hot and dry conditions that characterized the Triassic. Their kidneys were more efficient at conserving water, and their scaly skin was less permeable than that of synapsids, reducing water loss through evaporation. Throughout the early and middle Triassic, archosaurs diversified into a bewildering array of forms. There were the pseudosuchians, the crocodile line, which included both the ancestors of modern crocodiles and a variety of large terrestrial predators. Creatures like Saurosuchus and Phasolosuchus were massive quadrupedal carnivores with powerful jaws and armored bodies. They were apex predators, and for a time, they seemed destined to inherit the earth. Then there were the smaller, more agile archosaurs. Forms like Lagosuchus were bipedal, meaning they walked on their hind legs, with long limbs built for speed. These creatures were swift-moving predators, chasing down smaller prey with quick bursts of acceleration. They had hollow bones, lightweight but strong, and their tails were long and flexible, acting as counterbalances when they ran. It was from these smaller bipedal archosaurs that dinosaurs would eventually emerge. The first dinosaurs pinpointing the exact origin of dinosaurs is tricky. The fossil record, especially from the Middle Triassic, is frustratingly sparse. What we do know is that by the late Triassic, around 231 to 230 million years ago, true dinosaurs had appeared on the scene. One of the earliest sites preserving dinosaur fossils is the Ishigualasto Formation in Argentina, part of a region often called the Valley of the Moon, due to its otherworldly, barren landscape. Here, paleontologists have uncovered a treasure trove of late Triassic life, dating to around 231 million years ago, including some of the oldest known dinosaurs. Herrerasaurus is one such dinosaur, a sleek, bipedal predator measuring anywhere from 3 to 6 meters long, based on different specimens found. It had a long, narrow skull filled with sharp serrated teeth, perfect for slicing through flesh. Its arms were relatively short but strong, ending in clawed hands capable of grasping prey. Herrerasaurus was a hunter, fast and deadly, likely preying on smaller reptiles and early mammal-like creatures. Another early dinosaur from this same region is Eoraptor, an even smaller creature, barely a meter in length. Eoraptor had a mix of features that made paleontologists debate whether it was a primitive theropod or a basal member of another dinosaur lineage. Its teeth suggest it may have been omnivorous, capable of eating both plants and small animals. What's clear is that Eoraptor represents a very early stage in dinosaur evolution, a glimpse of what these animals looked like before they diversified into the myriad forms that would follow. And then there was Chelophysis, known from the southwestern United States. Chelophysis was a lightly built theropod, about 2 to 3 meters long, with hollow bones and a graceful, slender build. It had a long neck, a narrow snout, and what appears to have been keen eyesight. based on its skull structure, suggesting it was an active predator. Fossil evidence from the famous Ghost Ranch site in New Mexico shows that Coelophysis may have lived in groups, with hundreds of individuals dying together, possibly from a sudden flood or drought. This hints at social behavior, an early indication that dinosaurs were more than solitary hunters. These early dinosaurs shared certain key features that defined them as a group. They all had an upright posture, with legs positioned directly beneath the body. They had specialized hip structures, with a socket in the pelvis that allowed for a greater range of motion. They had extra vertebrae in the hip region, providing additional support for their upright stance. And they had unique ankle joints that allowed for more efficient movement. But here's the critical point. In the late Triassic, dinosaurs were not dominant. They were a minority, living in the shadows of larger, more established groups. The Pseudosuchians were the top predators. The synapsids, though declining, were still present. And the early dinosaurs. They were small, relatively rare, and specialized. So what changed? Approximately 201 million years ago, another mass extinction struck. It wasn't as devastating as the Permian-Triassic event, but it was severe enough to reshape the biosphere once again. The causes are still debated. Massive volcanic eruptions associated with the breakup of Pangaea, particularly the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, likely played a role. These eruptions would have released enormous quantities of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide, triggering rapid climate change, ocean acidification, and ecosystem collapse. Whatever the precise mechanism, the result was clear. Many of the dominant groups of the Triassic were wiped out. The large Pseudosuchian predators vanished. Many synapsids disappeared. Even some early dinosaur lineages went extinct. But the dinosaurs that survived found themselves in a world with empty niches and reduced competition. The playing field had been leveled, and dinosaurs, with their efficient respiratory systems, upright posture, and adaptability, were perfectly positioned to take advantage. This is the paradox of extinction events. They are catastrophic for life in the moment, but they also open doors for new groups to rise. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction was the event that allowed dinosaurs to step out of the shadows and begin their long reign. As the Triassic ended and the Jurassic began, the world was transforming. Pangaea was starting to fracture, rifts opening up that would eventually split the supercontinent into northern and southern landmasses. The climate was becoming more humid, with increased rainfall supporting lusher vegetation. And dinosaurs were diversifying rapidly, filling ecological roles as herbivores, carnivores, and everything in between. The Age of Dinosaurs had truly begun. The Triassic legacy. Before we move forward into the Jurassic, it's worth pausing to consider what the Triassic period established. This was not just a time of recovery from extinction. It was a crucible of innovation. The Triassic saw the first appearance of many groups that would define the Mesozoic era. The first true mammals appeared, tiny shrew-like creatures that would remain in the shadows for the next 150 million years. The first pterosaurs took to the skies, flying reptiles with membranous wings supported by elongated finger bones. The first ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs entered the oceans, adapting to fully aquatic lifestyles. The first turtles emerged, with their distinctive protective shells, and the first crocodilomorphs appeared, the ancestors of modern crocodiles. But most importantly, the Triassic gave us dinosaurs. These animals, which began as minor players in a world still dominated by other groups, would go on to become the most successful large terrestrial vertebrates in Earth's history. Their story is one of resilience, adaptation, and relentless diversification, and it's a story that's only just beginning. The Jurassic Period, when giants walked the Earth. The Jurassic Period, stretching from 201 million years ago to 145 million years ago, is perhaps the most iconic chapter in the dinosaur story. This was the age when dinosaurs truly came into their own, when they grew to sizes that defied comprehension, and when the planet itself seemed tailor-made for their success. If the Triassic was a time of experimentation and recovery, the Jurassic was a time of flourishing. The climate was warm and humid, the continents were greening with lush vegetation, and dinosaurs had claimed their place at the top of the food chain. A changing world. By the early Jurassic, Pangaea was continuing its breakup. The supercontinent was splitting into two major landmasses: Laurasia in the north, which would eventually become North America, Europe, and Asia, and Gondwana in the south, which would become South America, Africa, Antarctica, India, and Australia. This rifting process was accompanied by volcanic activity and the opening of new ocean basins, most notably the Central Atlantic Ocean. As the continents drifted apart, shallow seas flooded low-lying areas, creating extensive coastlines and marine habitats. These seas would become important in the evolution of marine life, but they also influenced terrestrial climates, moderating temperatures and increasing rainfall. The Jurassic climate was generally warmer than today, with no polar ice caps. Even the poles were relatively mild, covered in forests rather than ice sheets. The increased humidity and warmth supported the growth of vast forests dominated by conifers, cycads, ferns, and ginkgos. These forests were lush and dense, providing abundant food for herbivorous dinosaurs and, in turn, prey for the carnivores that hunted them. One of the most significant developments in Jurassic plant life was the continued success of conifers, the ancestors of modern pines, spruces, and firs. These trees could grow to enormous heights, creating towering forest canopies. Cycads, which resembled palms but were actually more closely related to conifers, were also common, their stout trunks and crown of leaves making them a distinctive feature of the landscape. And ferns, which had been around since the Devonian period, continued to carpet the forest floors, thriving in the shady understory. This abundance of vegetation created the ecological foundation for the rise of the sauropods, the long-necked giants that would define the Jurassic. The sauropods, evolution's largest experiment. Sauropods are, without question, the most awe-inspiring dinosaurs. These were the largest land animals to ever walk the earth, dwarfing even the mightiest elephants by an order of magnitude. To understand just how extraordinary sauropods were, consider this. A large bull African elephant weighs about 6 metric tons. The largest sauropods weighed upwards of 70 to 100 metric tons or more. That's the weight of more than 10 elephants combined, carried on 4 legs and supported by a skeleton of bone. How did they get so big? And more importantly, why? Sauropods descended from smaller bipedal ancestors called prosauropods, which had appeared in the late Triassic. These early relatives, like Plateosaurus, were omnivorous or herbivorous, walking on 2 legs but capable of dropping to all 4s when feeding. Over time, some of these lineages became fully quadrupedal, developing longer necks to reach high vegetation and larger bodies to accommodate the massive guts needed to process plant material. By the early Jurassic, true sauropods had appeared. Early forms like Barapasaurus and Volcanodon were already impressively large, but they were just the beginning. As the Jurassic progressed, sauropods diversified into two main groups: the Diplodocus and the Macronarians. Diplodocus, which include famous genera like Diplodocus, Apatosaurus, and Brachiosaurus, were characterized by their long, whip-like tails and relatively slender builds. Diplodocus, for instance, could reach lengths of up to 27 meters, but much of that length was tail. Its neck was also extraordinarily long, but its head was small, almost comically so, with peg-like teeth adapted for stripping leaves from branches. Diplodocus likely fed on low-growing vegetation, swinging its neck side to side to crop ferns and shrubs. Apatosaurus, often confused with Brontosaurus, which is now recognized as a valid separate genus, was more robust, with a thicker neck and a heavier build. It likely fed in a similar manner to Diplodocus, but may have been capable of rearing up on its hind legs to reach higher branches, using its tail as a tripod for balance. Brachiosaurus, on the other hand, represents a different feeding strategy. Its front legs were longer than its hind legs, giving it a giraffe-like posture that allowed it to reach vegetation high in the canopy. Brachiosaurus had a longer, more vertical neck than Diplodocus, and its teeth were chisel-shaped, suited for biting off tough leaves from conifer branches. At an estimated weight of 50 to 60 metric tons, Brachiosaurus was a true giant, a living skyscraper browsing the treetops. The Macronarians also included the Titanosaurs, which would become even more diverse in the Cretaceous period. These were the heavyweights of the sauropod world, with some species like Argentinosaurus and Patagotitan reaching estimated weights of 70 to 100 metric tons or more. Fossils of these animals are staggeringly large. A single vertebra can be the size of a dinner table, and a femur can stand taller than a grown human. But size raises questions. How did sauropods support such massive bodies? How did they breathe efficiently? How did they eat enough to fuel their metabolism? The answers lie in a suite of adaptations unique to sauropods. First, their bones were not solid. Like modern birds, sauropods had pneumatic bones, riddled with air sacs that reduced their overall weight without sacrificing strength. These air sacs were part of a sophisticated respiratory system that allowed for a one-way flow of air through the lungs, maximizing oxygen extraction. This bird-like respiratory system was crucial for supporting the metabolic demands of such large bodies. Second, sauropods had columnar legs, like those of elephants, with the bones arranged vertically to bear weight efficiently. Their feet were padded with soft tissue, distributing their weight over a larger surface area and preventing them from sinking into soft ground. Trackways preserved in ancient mudflats show that sauropods walked with a surprisingly light step, despite their enormous mass. Third, sauropods didn't chew their food. Their teeth were simple and peg-like, designed for cropping vegetation, not grinding it. Instead, they swallowed their food whole and relied on a muscular gizzard, often containing gastroliths, stomach stones, to mechanically break down plant material. This allowed them to process food quickly, spending more time eating and less time chewing. And finally, sauropods laid eggs, lots of them, but the eggs were relatively small. This meant that even the largest sauropods could reproduce without the constraints of live birth, which would have required impossibly long gestation periods and the burden of carrying a massive fetus. The theropods, predators in the shadows. While sauropods were the giants of the Jurassic, they were not without threats. The theropods, a diverse group of bipedal carnivorous dinosaurs, were the apex predators of the era, and some of them grew to formidable sizes to take on the massive herbivores. Allosaurus is perhaps the most famous Jurassic predator. At around 9 to 10 meters in length and weighing up to 2 metric tons, Allosaurus was built for power and speed. It had a large, robust skull with serrated blade-like teeth designed for slicing through flesh. Its jaws could open wide, and its bite was strong enough to grip and tear meat from bone, though not as powerful as the bone-crushing bites of later tyrannosaurids. Allosaurus had strong forelimbs, with 3-fingered hands tipped with large curved claws, which it likely used to grapple with prey or deliver slashing wounds. Fossil evidence suggests that Allosaurus may have hunted in groups, or at least scavenged communally. Multiple Allosaurus skeletons have been found at sites like the Cleveland Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry in Utah, suggesting that they were attracted to the same locations, possibly water sources where prey animals became trapped in mud. Another notable Jurassic theropod is Ceratosaurus, a smaller but no less deadly predator. Ceratosaurus had a distinctive horn on its snout and bony ridges above its eyes, giving it a unique appearance. It was likely a more solitary hunter than Allosaurus, preying on medium-sized dinosaurs and perhaps even venturing into aquatic environments to catch fish or other water-dwelling prey. And then there were the smaller, more agile theropods. Compsognathus, one of the smallest known dinosaurs, was about the size of a chicken. It had long legs built for speed and sharp teeth suited for catching insects, lizards, and other small prey. Fossils of Compsognathus have been found with the remains of lizards preserved in their stomach cavities, giving us a rare glimpse into what they ate. These smaller theropods are important because they represent the lineage that would eventually give rise to birds. Throughout the Jurassic, theropods were evolving features that would later become characteristic of avians: hollow bones, 3-fingered hands, and in some cases, even primitive feathers or feather-like structures. The first birds, the most famous transitional fossil in the history of paleontology, is Archaeopteryx, discovered in the limestone quarries of Solnhofen, Germany. Dating to the late Jurassic, around 150 million years ago, Archaeopteryx is a stunning example of an animal caught between two worlds, dinosaur and bird. Archaeopteryx had feathers, wings, and a wishbone, features we associate with modern birds. But it also had teeth, a long bony tail, and clawed fingers on its wings, features that link it unmistakably to theropod dinosaurs. Its skeleton shows clear evidence of its theropod ancestry, particularly in the structure of its hips, legs, and feet. Whether Archaeopteryx could fly or merely glide is still debated, but what's undeniable is that it represents a critical step in the evolution of birds. The Jurassic theropods were experimenting with flight, and some of their descendants would eventually take to the skies permanently. The oceans and skies. While dinosaurs dominated the land, the Jurassic oceans and skies were ruled by other reptiles. In the seas, ichthyosaurs, dolphin-like marine reptiles, were thriving. These were fully aquatic animals with streamlined bodies, paddle-like limbs, and large eyes adapted for hunting in deep water. Some ichthyosaurs grew to enormous sizes, rivaling modern whales in length. Plesiosaurs were also common, with their characteristic long necks and paddle-like flippers. Some, like Elasmosaurus, had necks so long they could extend several meters ahead of their bodies, allowing them to ambush fish from a distance. In the skies, pterosaurs were diversifying. These were not dinosaurs, but a separate lineage of flying reptiles. Jurassic pterosaurs included both small, agile flyers and larger, more robust forms. Dimorphodon had a large head with sharp teeth, suggesting it fed on fish or small terrestrial prey. Rhamphorhynchus had a long tail with a diamond-shaped vein at the end, which may have helped stabilize it in flight. The Jurassic ecosystem. The Jurassic was a time of ecological complexity. Forests teemed with insects, including early bees, beetles, and dragonflies, with wingspans that would startle modern observers. Amphibians, though reduced in diversity since the Permian, still inhabited wetlands and river systems. Early mammals scurried through the underbrush, small and nocturnal, avoiding the attention of the dinosaurs that dominated the daylight hours. It was a world of balance and competition, where size was an advantage for some and agility for others. The sauropods grazed the forests and plains, the theropods hunted them, and smaller dinosaurs filled countless niches in between. And then, as with all things, the Jurassic came to an end. Around 145 million years ago, the period gave way to the Cretaceous, and with it came new challenges, new opportunities, and a final dramatic chapter in the story of the dinosaurs. The Cretaceous period, spanning from 145 million years ago to 66 million years ago, was the final and longest chapter in the Age of Dinosaurs. It was a time of unparalleled diversity when dinosaurs reached their peak in terms of variety, specialization, and sheer dominance over terrestrial ecosystems. This was the age of Tyrannosaurus rex, of Triceratops with its massive frill and 3 horns, of Velociraptor stalking across Mongolian plains, and of the duck-billed hadrosaurs that roamed in herds so large they must have shaken the ground as they passed. This was also the age when flowering plants appeared, transforming landscapes and creating new ecological niches for herbivores to exploit. But the Cretaceous was also the age that ended in catastrophe, when a rock from space brought the curtain down on 186 million years of dinosaur evolution. Let's begin at the beginning, with a world still recognizable from the Jurassic, but changing rapidly. The breaking of Pangaea. The Cretaceous world looked very different from the Jurassic. Pangaea had split apart more dramatically, and the continents were drifting toward the configurations we recognize today, though they were still far from their modern positions. The Atlantic Ocean was widening, separating the Americas from Europe and Africa. India was an island continent, slowly drifting northward on a collision course with Asia. Australia and Antarctica were still connected to each other, but beginning to separate from South America. And in North America, a vast inland sea, the Western Interior Seaway, split the continent in two, creating eastern and western landmasses separated by water. This geographic fragmentation had profound effects on dinosaur evolution. Isolated populations on different continents began to evolve independently, leading to distinct regional faunas. Dinosaurs in South America looked different from those in North America, which in turn differed from those in Asia and Europe. This biogeographic diversity is one of the reasons the Cretaceous was such a rich time for dinosaur life. The climate of the Cretaceous was even warmer than the Jurassic. There were no polar ice caps, and even the high latitudes were temperate. supporting forests and dinosaur populations. Sea levels were high, higher than at almost any other point in Earth's history, flooding low-lying continental areas and creating extensive shallow seas that teemed with life. But the most important ecological development of the Cretaceous was the rise of flowering plants, the angiosperms. The angiosperm revolution. For most of the Mesozoic era, the plant world had been dominated by gymnosperms, conifers, cycads, and ferns. These plants had served dinosaurs well, providing abundant foliage for herbivores to consume. But in the early Cretaceous, around 130 million years ago, a new group of plants appeared, the angiosperms, or flowering plants. Angiosperms were revolutionary for several reasons. They grew faster than gymnosperms, allowing them to colonize disturbed environments quickly. They produced flowers, which attracted insect pollinators, leading to more efficient reproduction. And they bore fruits, which could be dispersed by animals, spreading their seeds over wide areas. By the late Cretaceous, angiosperms had become the dominant plant group in many ecosystems, replacing the ancient conifer forests with new types of vegetation. Deciduous trees, grasses, though not yet the expansive grasslands of later eras, and flowering shrubs created diverse habitats that supported an equally diverse array of herbivorous dinosaurs. This shift in plant life had cascading effects on dinosaur evolution. Herbivores had to adapt to new types of food, developing specialized teeth and digestive systems to process flowering plants. And as herbivores changed, so too did the predators that hunted them. The Cretaceous was, in essence, a time of arms race between plants, herbivores, and carnivores, each adapting to the changes wrought by the others. The herbivores, a Cretaceous menagerie. The Cretaceous saw an explosion of herbivorous dinosaur diversity, with new groups evolving to fill every conceivable ecological niche. Let's start with the ornithopods, a group of bipedal and quadrupedal herbivores that became incredibly successful during this period. The most famous ornithopods are the hadrosaurs, often called duck-billed dinosaurs because of their broad, flattened snouts. Hadrosaurs, like Edmontosaurus and Parasaurolophus, were large animals, some reaching lengths of up to 12 meters. They had hundreds of tiny teeth packed into dental batteries, structures that allowed them to efficiently grind tough plant material. As teeth wore down, new ones grew in to replace them, a conveyor belt of dental renewal that ensured they could always process food. Many hadrosaurs had elaborate crests on their heads, especially in genera like Parasaurolophus and Corythosaurus. These crests were hollow and connected to the nasal passages, and scientists believe they may have been used for vocal communication. By blowing air through these structures, hadrosaurs could produce low-frequency calls that traveled long distances, useful for coordinating herd movements or attracting mates. Hadrosaur fossils are often found in large concentrations, suggesting they lived in herds. Bone beds in Montana and Alberta contain hundreds or even thousands of individuals of a single species, all killed together, possibly by floods or droughts. These mass death assemblages give us a rare glimpse into the social structure of these animals, showing juveniles, adults, and even hatchlings all mixed together. Another major group of Cretaceous herbivores was the ceratopsians, the horned and frilled dinosaurs. These animals are some of the most visually striking dinosaurs ever to exist. Triceratops is the most famous ceratopsian, and for good reason. This massive herbivore, weighing up to 6 to 10 metric tons, had a skull adorned with a large bony frill and 3 prominent horns, 2 above the eyes and 1 on the snout. The frill was likely used for display, signaling to rivals and potential mates, while the horns could have been used in combat or defense against predators. Triceratops lived in what is now Western North America during the very end of the Cretaceous, making it one of the last non-avian dinosaurs. Its fossils are incredibly common, with some estimates suggesting that Triceratops made up a significant portion of the large herbivore fauna in its ecosystem. This abundance suggests it was a highly successful animal, well adapted to its environment. Other ceratopsians, like Styracosaurus and Centrosaurus, had even more elaborate frills, adorned with long spikes and decorative horns that varied from species to species. Some paleontologists believe these variations in frill shape and horn arrangement were used for species recognition, allowing dinosaurs to identify members of their own species at a distance. Then there were the ankylosaurs, the armored tanks of the dinosaur world. These herbivores were covered in bony plates called osteoderms, which protected them from predators. Some ankylosaurs, like Ankylosaurus itself, also had a massive club at the end of their tails, formed from fused vertebrae and covered in thick bone. This tail club could deliver devastating blows, capable of breaking the leg bones of even the largest predators. Ankylosaurs were low to the ground, built like living fortresses. Their bellies were the only vulnerable part of their bodies, and they likely relied on their armor and tail clubs to fend off attacks. Fossil evidence suggests that predators did occasionally target ankylosaurs, as bite marks from theropods have been found on ankylosaur armor, but successfully killing one would have been a difficult and dangerous task. And let's not forget the stegosaurs, though they were less common in the Cretaceous than in the Jurassic. These dinosaurs, with their distinctive rows of plates along their backs and spiked tails, were largely replaced by ankylosaurs in the Cretaceous, but a few species persisted into the early Cretaceous in Asia and Africa. The carnivores, apex predators and swift hunters. The Cretaceous was also the age of some of the most fearsome predators ever to walk the earth. At the top of the food chain were the tyrannosaurs, a group of large theropods that dominated the late Cretaceous ecosystems of North America and Asia. Tyrannosaurus rex is, without question, the most famous dinosaur of all time. This apex predator stood about 4 meters tall at the hips, measured up to 12 to 13 meters in length, and weighed somewhere in the range of 6 to 9 metric tons, though exact weight estimates vary based on different calculation methods. Its skull was massive, over 1.5 meters long, packed with teeth the size of bananas. These teeth were not blade-like, as in most theropods, but thick and conical, designed to crush bone as well as tear flesh. T-Rex had one of the most powerful bites of any terrestrial animal, with estimates suggesting it could exert a force of over 6 metric tons, though the precise measurements continue to be refined through research. This bite, strength combined with its size and robust build, made T-Rex a formidable hunter and scavenger. Fossil evidence shows that T-Rex fed on a variety of prey, including hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, and even other tyrannosaurs. Bite marks on Triceratops fossils matched the teeth of T-Rex, and in some cases, the wound shows signs of healing, indicating that the Triceratops survived the encounter. Tyrannosaurus rex was not alone. Other tyrannosaurs, like Tarbosaurus in Asia and Albertosaurus in North America, filled similar ecological roles. Tarbosaurus was slightly smaller than T-Rex, but still a top predator in its environment. Albertosaurus, meanwhile, has been found in bone beds, suggesting it may have lived and hunted in groups, though this behavior is still debated among paleontologists. Not all Cretaceous predators were massive, though. The dromaeosaurids, often called raptors, were smaller but highly agile and intelligent hunters. Velociraptor, made famous by popular culture, was actually much smaller than often depicted. It stood about half a meter tall at the hip and was roughly 2 meters long, about the size of a large turkey. But what Velociraptor lacked in size, it made up for in speed and what appears to have been relatively advanced hunting behavior for its size. It had a large, sickle-shaped claw on each hind foot, which it likely used to pin down prey or deliver slashing wounds. Its arms were long and flexible, ending in 3-fingered hands with sharp claws, useful for grasping and manipulating prey. One of the most famous fossils ever discovered is the fighting dinosaur specimen from Mongolia, which shows a velociraptor locked in mortal combat with a protoceratops. The velociraptor's killing claw is embedded in the protoceratops's throat, while the ceratopsian's jaws are clamped around the predator's arm. Both animals died in this position, possibly buried suddenly by a sandstorm or collapsing dune. This fossil is a snapshot of predator-prey, dynamics frozen in time. Larger dromaeosaurids, like Utahraptor and Dakotaraptor, were even more formidable. Utahraptor could grow up to 7 meters long and weighed around half a metric ton, making it one of the largest known dromaeosaurids. With its size, speed, and deadly claws, Utahraptor would have been a fearsome predator, likely capable of taking down prey much larger than itself. Then there were the unusual theropods, the ones that defied easy categorization. Spinosaurus, for instance, is one of the most bizarre and debated dinosaurs. Living in what is now North Africa, Spinosaurus had a long, crocodile-like snout filled with conical teeth suited for catching fish. It had relatively short hind legs and long forelimbs compared to other large theropods, which has led some researchers to suggest it may have been semi-aquatic, spending much of its time in water, though this interpretation remains debated. Most strikingly, it had a tall sail on its back, supported by elongated neural spines. This sail may have been used for display, thermoregulation, or both. Spinosaurus is estimated to have been one of the largest theropods, possibly reaching lengths of over 15 meters, though much of its anatomy remains poorly understood due to incomplete fossils and the destruction of some key specimens. Other unusual theropods included the therizinosaurs, a group of long-necked, pot-bellied herbivores with enormous claws. Therizinosaurus had claws up to 1 meter long, the largest claws of any known animal. Despite their fearsome appearance, these claws were likely used not for hunting, but for stripping leaves from branches, or perhaps defending against predators. Therizinosaurs represent a remarkable evolutionary shift, as they descended from carnivorous ancestors but adapted to a plant-based diet. The skies, pterosaurs reached their peak. While dinosaurs ruled the land, the skies of the Cretaceous belonged to the pterosaurs. These flying reptiles had been around since the Triassic, but in the Cretaceous, they reached their greatest diversity and largest sizes. Quetzalcoatlus is the most famous Cretaceous pterosaur, and one of the largest flying animals of all time. With a wingspan of up to 10 to 11 meters, Quetzalcoatlus was about the size of a small airplane. It had a long, stiff neck, a large head with a pointed beak, and long, thin wings supported by a single elongated finger. Despite its size, Quetzalcoatlus was likely a skilled flyer, using updrafts and thermals to soar over the landscape. When on the ground, it may have walked on all fours, using its wings as forelimbs, and hunted small animals or scavenged carcasses. Other Cretaceous pterosaurs were equally impressive. Pteranodon had a wingspan of about 7 meters and a distinctive crest on its head, possibly used for display or steering in flight. It likely fed on fish, skimming the surface of the ocean or diving to catch prey. Fossil evidence shows that Pteranodon lived in large colonies, nesting on coastal cliffs, much like modern seabirds. These pterosaurs were not dinosaurs, but they shared the skies with early birds, which were diversifying rapidly during the Cretaceous. By the end of the period, birds had evolved into a variety of forms, filling ecological niches as insectivores, fish eaters, and seed eaters. The stage was set for their dominance in the post-dinosaur world. Regional diversity, a global perspective. One of the most fascinating aspects of Cretaceous dinosaurs is their regional diversity. As continents drifted apart, dinosaur populations evolved in isolation, leading to distinct faunas on different landmasses. In North America, the late Cretaceous was dominated by tyrannosaurs, hadrosaurs, and ceratopsians. This region, particularly the western half split by the Western Interior Seaway, is one of the best studied dinosaur ecosystems in the world, thanks to rich fossil deposits in places like Montana, Wyoming, and Alberta. In South America, a different set of dinosaurs thrived. The abelisaurids, a group of theropods with short, deep skulls and tiny arms, were the top predators. Carnotaurus, with its distinctive horns above the eyes, was one of the most unusual abelisaurids. South America was also home to some of the largest sauropods, including the titanosaurs Agenosaurus and Patagoton, which may have been the heaviest land animals ever. In Asia, tyrannosaurs like Tarbosaurus shared the landscape with protoceratopsians, smaller relatives of Triceratops, and a variety of theropods, including the famous Velociraptor. The Gobi Desert has yielded some of the most complete and well-preserved dinosaur fossils in the world, giving paleontologists unparalleled insights into Cretaceous life. In Europe, which was a series of islands during much of the Cretaceous, dinosaurs were smaller on average due to island dwarfism, a phenomenon where animals evolve smaller body sizes in resource-limited island environments. Fossils from Romania and Spain show dwarf sauropods and hadrosaurs that were a fraction of the size of their mainland relatives. And in Antarctica, which was not yet covered in ice, dinosaurs like Cryolophosaurus roamed temperate forests. These polar dinosaurs had to cope with long, dark winters, possibly migrating to avoid the worst of the cold or entering periods of dormancy. The final days, by the very end of the Cretaceous, around 68 to 66 million years ago, dinosaurs were still thriving. The fossil record from this time shows no signs of decline. In fact, dinosaur diversity remained high right up until the moment of extinction. In the Hell Creek Formation of Montana, one of the most intensively studied late Cretaceous ecosystems, we find Tyrannosaurus rex, Triceratops, Edmontosaurus, Ankylosaurus, and a host of smaller dinosaurs, all living together in a complex web of predator and prey relationships. The landscape was a mix of rivers, floodplains, and forests, with a climate that was warm and humid. There's no evidence that dinosaurs were dying out on their own. No gradual decline, no slow extinction. They were successful diverse and dominant, just as they had been for over 150 million years. And then, 66 million years ago, everything changed in an instant. To truly understand dinosaurs, we need to move beyond their size and appearance and delve into how they actually lived. What was their physiology like? How did they grow? How did they reproduce? And perhaps most debated of all, were they warm-blooded or cold-blooded? Let's start with growth. Dinosaurs grew fast, astonishingly fast by modern standards. Studies of dinosaur bone histology, examining thin sections of fossilized bone under microscopes, reveal growth rings similar to those in trees. These rings, called lines of arrested growth, show periods of rapid growth alternating with slower growth or dormancy. Sauropods, for instance, grew from tiny hatchlings weighing just a few kilograms to adults weighing tens of metric tons in what appears to have been as little as 20 to 30 years, based on analysis of bone growth patterns. Tyrannosaurus rex reached its full adult size in about 20 years, with growth rates during its teenage years estimated at over 2 kilograms per day. This rapid growth required enormous amounts of food and a metabolism capable of processing it efficiently. This brings us to the question of thermoregulation. For decades, scientists debated whether dinosaurs were ectothermic, like modern reptiles, relying on external heat sources to regulate body temperature, or endothermic, like modern mammals and birds, generating their own heat internally. The answer, as with many things in paleontology, is complicated. It seems that different dinosaurs had different metabolic strategies. Large sauropods may have been gigantothermic, meaning their sheer size allowed them to maintain a relatively constant body temperature simply because they cool down very slowly. Small theropods, especially those closely related to birds, likely had some degree of endothermy, with insulating feathers helping to retain heat. Evidence from bone structure, growth rates, and predator-to-prey ratios suggests that many dinosaurs had metabolic rates somewhere between modern reptiles and mammals. They were not cold-blooded in the sense of being sluggish and dependent on basking in the sun, but they also weren't as metabolically active as modern birds or mammals. This remains an active area of research, with ongoing discoveries refining our understanding. One of the most exciting discoveries in recent decades is the prevalence of feathers among theropod dinosaurs. Originally thought to be unique to birds, feathers have now been found in a wide variety of theropods, from tiny compsognathids to large tyrannosaurs. These feathers range from simple filaments, more like hair than modern bird feathers, to complex, branching structures with veins and barbs. Feathers likely evolved initially for insulation, helping small theropods retain body heat. Later, they were co-opted for display, with brightly colored feathers used to attract mates or intimidate rivals. And eventually, in some lineages, feathers became adapted for flight. Fossils from China, particularly from the Liaoning province, have preserved feathers in exquisite detail, even showing traces of melanin pigments that allow scientists to reconstruct the colors of these ancient animals. Microraptor, a small four-winged dromaeosaurid, had black iridescent feathers similar to those of modern crows. Sinosauropteryx, one of the earliest feathered dinosaurs, had a rusty reddish coloration with alternating light and dark bands on its tail. Reproduction and parental care dinosaurs laid eggs. That much we know for certain. Fossilized eggs and nests have been found on every continent, providing insights into dinosaur reproduction and parental care. dinosaur eggs varied widely in size and shape. Sauropod eggs were surprisingly small relative to the size of the adults, typically about the size of a grapefruit or basketball. Theropod eggs were often elongated and laid in pairs, arranged in circular nests. Some dinosaurs, like the oviraptorids, sat on their nests to incubate their eggs, their bodies positioned in a brooding posture remarkably similar to that of modern birds. One of the most famous dinosaur nesting sites is Egg Mountain in Montana, where paleontologist Jack Horner discovered nests of Maiasaura, a hadrosaur. These nests contained not just eggs but also hatchlings, juveniles, and evidence of repeated nesting in the same location over multiple years. This suggests that Maiasaura returned to the same nesting grounds year after year, much like modern sea turtles or salmon. Even more striking, the nests showed signs of parental care. The hatchlings had worn teeth, indicating they had been eating, but their bones were not yet fully developed, suggesting they were not yet capable of walking long distances. The adults must have brought food to the nest, feeding their young until they were strong enough to fend for themselves. This level of parental investment is more typical of birds and mammals than of modern reptiles. Other evidence of social behavior comes from trackways and bone beds. Trackways show groups of dinosaurs moving together, sometimes with smaller individuals in the center and larger ones on the outside, a formation that suggests protective behavior. Bone beds, where hundreds or thousands of individuals of a single species are found together, suggest that some dinosaurs lived in herds or flocks, possibly for protection against predators or to coordinate feeding and migration. Communication and senses. Dinosaurs communicated with each other in a variety of ways, using visual displays, vocalizations, and possibly even scent. The elaborate crests of hadrosaurs, the frills and horns of ceratopsians, and the sails of spinosaurs were likely used for display, signaling to potential mates or rivals. Bright colors, which we can now infer from fossilized pigments, would have made these displays even more striking. Imagine a Parasaurolophus with a brightly colored crest, resonating with low-frequency calls that echoed across the Cretaceous plains. Dinosaur senses varied by species. Predators like Tyrannosaurus rex had keen eyesight, with forward-facing eyes that provided binocular vision, crucial for judging distances when hunting. Their sense of smell was also highly developed. The olfactory bulbs in the brain of T. rex were large, which suggests it could detect carrion from considerable distances. Smaller theropods, like Troodon, had proportionally large brains and big eyes, which suggests they were relatively intelligent and had excellent vision, possibly for hunting at dawn and dusk, or even at night. Troodon's brain-to-body ratio was comparable to that of modern ostriches, one of the more intelligent bird species. Herbivores, on the other hand, often had eyes positioned on the sides of their heads, providing a wide field of view to detect approaching predators. Their sense of smell would have been important for finding food and detecting danger, though probably not as acute as that of the carnivores. Dinosaur ecosystems. Dinosaurs did not live in isolation. They were part of complex ecosystems, interacting with plants, insects, other reptiles, amphibians, early mammals, and each other. The forests of the Mesozoic were alive with the buzz of insects. Bees had appeared by the Cretaceous, pollinating the newly evolved flowering plants. Dragonflies with wingspans of over 1/2 meter darted through the air. Ants and termites built colonies, playing important roles in soil ecology and nutrient cycling. Mammals were present throughout the Mesozoic, though they remained small and mostly nocturnal. They filled ecological niches as insectivores, seed-eaters, and even occasional predators of small dinosaurs. Some Mesozoic mammals, like Repenomamus, were capable of eating juvenile dinosaurs. Fossils have been found with baby Psittacosaurus in their stomachs. In the waters, crocodilians and turtles were common, along with a variety of fish. The skies were shared by pterosaurs and early birds, each competing for insect prey and nesting sites. Dinosaurs shaped their environments in profound ways. Large sauropods, moving through forests in herds, would have knocked down trees and trampled underbrush, creating clearings that allowed new plants to grow. Their dung, deposited in massive quantities, would have fertilized the soil and spread seeds over wide areas. Predators, by hunting herbivores, would have influenced the behavior and distribution of their prey, creating what ecologists call a landscape of fear. These ecosystems were dynamic, constantly changing in response to climate shifts, volcanic eruptions, sea level changes, and the evolution of new species. But they were also resilient, capable of recovering from disturbances and maintaining their complexity over millions of years. Until one day, they weren't. The end Cretaceous extinction, the day the dinosaurs died, 66 million years ago, on what started as an ordinary day in the late Cretaceous. A rock from space, an asteroid roughly 10 to 15 kilometers in diameter, slammed into the shallow waters off the coast of what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. Based on scientific estimates, it was traveling at approximately 20 kilometers per second, more than 58 times the speed of sound. The impact released energy equivalent to roughly 100 million megatons of TNT, or about 100 trillion tons, billions of times more powerful than the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In an instant, a crater approximately 180 to 200 kilometers wide was blasted into the Earth's surface. This crater is known today as Chicxulub, named after a nearby town. The immediate effects were apocalyptic. The asteroid vaporized upon impact, along with a massive volume of rock and seawater. A fireball erupted, reaching temperatures of tens of thousands of degrees. The shockwave from the impact would have flattened everything within hundreds of kilometers, triggering earthquakes with magnitudes far beyond anything recorded in human history. A colossal tsunami, perhaps a kilometer high, radiated outward from the impact site, inundating coastlines across the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. The force of the impact ejected billions of tons of molten rock and debris into the atmosphere, some of it reaching escape velocity and being flung into space before raining back down as fiery meteors. Within hours, the entire planet was affected. The ejected material, superheated by its passage through the atmosphere, ignited wildfires across continents. Forests burned. The air filled with smoke and ash. Animals caught in the open would have been roasted alive by the radiant heat. But the immediate destruction was only the beginning. The real killer was what came next. The impact had vaporized enormous quantities of sulfur-rich rock, particularly gypsum from the sea floor. This sulfur was injected into the stratosphere, where it formed sulfate aerosols, tiny particles that reflected sunlight back into space. Dust and soot from the impact and the global wildfires added to this veil, blocking out the sun for months or possibly years. The world plunged into darkness. Temperatures dropped precipitously, perhaps by as much as 26 degrees Celsius in some regions. This is known as an impact winter. a period of prolonged cold and darkness caused by the atmospheric debris. Without sunlight, photosynthesis stopped. Plants died. Herbivores, deprived of food, starved. Carnivores, with no herbivores to hunt, followed. The food chains collapsed, starting at the bottom and cascading upward. In the oceans, the effects were equally devastating. Plankton, the base of the marine food web, died off en masse. The acidification of the oceans, caused by sulfuric acid raining out of the atmosphere, made it difficult for organisms with calcium carbonate shells, like ammonites and many mollusks, to survive. The marine ecosystems, already stressed, broke down. The extinction was not instantaneous, but it was swift by geological standards. Within a few thousand years, perhaps even less, 75 to 80% of all species on Earth were gone, though estimates vary. All non-avian dinosaurs perished. The pterosaurs vanished. Marine reptiles like the mosasaurs and plesiosaurs disappeared. The ammonites, ancient mollusks that had survived every previous mass extinction, finally went extinct. But not everything died. Birds, the descendants of small feathered theropods, survived. Small mammals, which could shelter underground and had lower metabolic demands, made it through. Crocodiles and turtles, resilient and capable of surviving long periods without food, endured. Some fish, amphibians, and many insects survived as well. The survivors inherited a devastated but recovering world. In the decades and centuries following the impact, life began to return. Plants sprouted from seeds and spores that had lain dormant in the soil. Ferns were among the first to recolonize, creating a fern spike in the fossil record, a brief period when fern spores dominated over other plant types. Mammals, freed from the dominance of the dinosaurs, began to diversify. Birds spread into new habitats. The Cenozoic era, the age of mammals, had begun. Evidence and discovery. The story of how scientists pieced together the cause of the dinosaur extinction is as fascinating as the extinction itself. In 1980, a father and son team, physicist Luis Alvarez and geologist Walter Alvarez, published a groundbreaking paper proposing that a massive asteroid impact had caused the extinction. Their evidence was a thin layer of clay found at the Cretaceous-Paleogene boundary, the geological boundary marking the end of the Cretaceous period. This clay layer, found at sites around the world, contained unusually high concentrations of iridium, a rare element on Earth but common in asteroids. The discovery of iridium was the smoking gun. It suggested that an asteroid had struck the Earth, vaporizing and spreading its material globally. But the hypothesis was controversial. Many scientists were skeptical, arguing that volcanic activity or climate change were more likely causes. The debate was settled in the early 1990s when the Chicxulub crater was identified. Geophysicists had detected unusual magnetic and gravity anomalies in the Yucatan region in the 1970s, but it wasn't until the connection to the iridium layer was made that the crater's significance was understood. Subsequent drilling into the crater, including a major expedition in 2016, recovered rock samples that confirmed the impact. The rocks showed signs of extreme shock and heat, with minerals that could only form under the conditions of a massive impact. The age of the crater matched the age of the extinction event almost exactly, 66.043 million years ago, give or take a few thousand years. More recent discoveries have added even more detail to the story. In 2019, a site in North Dakota called Tanis was reported to contain fossils of fish and other animals that died within hours of the impact. The site preserves a snapshot of the immediate aftermath, with tektites, glassy spheres formed from molten rock, embedded in the gills of fish, and evidence of a massive surge of water, possibly a seiche, a standing wave triggered by the impact's seismic shocks. Chemical analysis of the Chicxulub impact material has even revealed what type of asteroid struck Earth. Research, published in 2024, confirmed that it was likely a carbonaceous chondrite, a type of asteroid rich in carbon and water. This asteroid had been traveling through space for billions of years before its fateful collision with Earth. Controversies and alternative theories. While the asteroid impact theory is now widely accepted, it's not without its complexities. Some scientists have pointed to other factors that may have contributed to the extinction, creating what could be described as a perfect storm of catastrophic events. One such factor is the Deccan Traps, a massive volcanic province in what is now India. Beginning around 66 million years ago, these volcanoes erupted on a colossal scale, pouring out lava over an area of 500,000 square kilometers and releasing enormous quantities of greenhouse gases and toxic sulfur compounds into the atmosphere. The timing of the Deccan Traps eruptions remains a subject of debate. Some studies suggest that the most intense phase occurred before the asteroid impact, which could mean the dinosaurs were already under stress from climate change when the asteroid delivered the final blow. Other studies suggest that the impact itself may have triggered a surge in volcanic activity, making the extinction even more severe, though this remains speculative. Another complicating factor is evidence of long-term environmental changes in the late Cretaceous. Sea levels were fluctuating, ecosystems were shifting in response to the spread of flowering plants, and there may have been episodes of cooling or warming that stressed dinosaur populations, though the extent of these effects is still being studied. However, the fossil record is clear on one point. Dinosaurs were not in decline before the extinction. They remained diverse and abundant right up to the end. The extinction was abrupt, not gradual, and it coincides precisely with the asteroid impact. The survivors and the legacy. The extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs was a tragedy in the history of life, but it was also an opportunity. The ecosystems of the Paleocene, the epoch immediately following the extinction, were fundamentally different from those of the Cretaceous. Mammals, which had spent over 150 million years as small, mostly nocturnal creatures, now had the chance to diversify. Within 10 million years, they had evolved into a wide variety of forms, filling the ecological niches left vacant by the dinosaurs. Some became herbivores, grazing on the new grasslands that were spreading across the continents. Others became predators, hunting the herbivores. Still others took to the trees, the skies, and even the oceans. Birds, the only surviving lineage of dinosaurs, also diversified rapidly. By the Eocene, just a few million years after the extinction, birds had evolved into many of the major groups we recognize today: waterfowl, shorebirds, raptors, parrots, and songbirds. In a very real sense, dinosaurs are not extinct. Every time you see a sparrow hopping on the sidewalk, a crow cawing from a tree, or an eagle soaring overhead, you are looking at a dinosaur. Birds are theropods, descended from small, feathered dinosaurs like Velociraptor and Archaeopteryx. They carry the legacy of the Mesozoic in their bones, their feathers, and their behavior. And beyond their direct descendants, dinosaurs have left an indelible mark on our planet. The ecosystems they shaped, the evolutionary innovations they pioneered, and the fossils they left behind all continue to inform our understanding of life on Earth. Modern discoveries and the future of paleontology. The study of dinosaurs is far from over. In fact, we are living in a golden age of dinosaur paleontology, with new species being discovered at an unprecedented rate. On average, paleontologists name more than 45 new dinosaur species every year. Advances in technology have revolutionized the field. CT scans allow scientists to peer inside fossilized skulls, revealing brain structures and inner ear anatomy that provide clues about intelligence and hearing. Synchrotron radiation imaging can detect trace elements in fossils, helping to reconstruct the colors of feathers and the chemistry of ancient environments. Three-dimensional modeling and computer simulations allow researchers to test hypotheses about how dinosaurs moved, how they fed, and how they interacted with their environments. Discoveries continue to surprise us. In 2014, Dreadnoughtus, one of the most complete giant sauropods ever found, was described, providing new insights into how these animals grew and lived. In 2019, a dinosaur tail preserved in amber was reported, with feathers and soft tissue intact, offering a rare glimpse into the fine details of dinosaur anatomy. And as we continue to explore remote regions, from the deserts of Mongolia to the badlands of Patagonia to the Arctic tundra, we find new fossils that challenge our assumptions and expand our understanding. The story of dinosaurs is not just a story of the past. It's a story about evolution, adaptation, and survival. It's a story about how life responds to change, how it thrives and diversifies, and how it can be brought low by forces beyond its control. It's also a cautionary tale. The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs was a random event, a cosmic accident. But the lesson it teaches is clear. No species, no matter how successful or dominant, is immune to extinction. The dinosaurs ruled the Earth for 186 million years, far longer than humans have existed. And yet, in the blink of an eye, they were gone. As we face our own challenges, climate change, habitat destruction, biodiversity loss, the story of the dinosaurs reminds us of the fragility of life and the importance of stewardship. The world we live in, this intricate, beautiful, and complex biosphere, is the product of billions of years of evolution. It deserves our respect and our protection. So the next time you look up at the sky and see a bird flying overhead, take a moment to appreciate it. You are witnessing the legacy of dinosaurs, creatures that once shook the ground with their footsteps and filled the air with their calls. They are gone, but they are not forgotten. And their story, told through fossils and fragments and the patient work of scientists, continues to unfold, layer by layer, bone by bone, revealing the wonders of a world that once was. If you enjoyed this journey through the Age of Dinosaurs, from their humble beginnings in the shadow of extinction to their reign as the dominant life forms on Earth, and finally to their tragic but fascinating end, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There are so many more stories to tell, from the rise of mammals to the evolution of humans, from the mysteries of deep time to the wonders of the natural world we still inhabit today. Thank you for listening. And remember, the past is never truly gone. It lives on in the rocks beneath our feet, in the fossils we unearth, and in the descendants that still walk, swim, and fly among us. Good night, and sleep well.